I've been playing Overwatch Classic, which is this limited time event Overwatch 2 is doing. I've actually been having fun, which is weird. I'm talking about having fun, and this is Overwatch. And I've been thinking about why that is. And it mostly has to do with how much the characters have changed for the worse over the years. I'm not even gonna talk about 6v6 or all the microtransactions and battle pass things, even though both of those are perfectly valid discussions as well. No, what I'm talking about is all the character reworks that made the game less fun. I miss things like the Mercy Res, Bastion's turret mode, Symmetra's teleport. The point I'm trying to make is that current heroes just feel like watered down versions of what they used to be. Allow me to elaborate for each hero, starting with Mercy and her ultimate. The classic version of the Resurrect, that is, in its ultimate form, just feels super impactful in a game when you use it, as opposed to the current version that works on a single person and has a cooldown, that's it. Not to mention that Mercy's core identity, the Resurrect, is on her ultimate, the most powerful ability. It just makes more sense. People complain about this ability at the time, and maybe that's justified. This version of the ultimate is like a rough edge to the game. But what I'm arguing is it's a rough edge that also makes the game more interesting and the character of Mercy more interesting. Let's also talk about Symmetra and her teleport. Alt teleport used to be such an interesting ability. It's this persistent building that stays in the world and it has a huge impact. Likewise for a future iteration of Symmetra where she could choose between a teleporter or a shield generator. This type of ultimate just makes the match way more dynamic, where the opposing team has to go out into the world and find this hidden structure, and it just changes the dynamic of a particular match. Not only is Symmetra more unique as a character, but a match feels more unique as well for having Symmetra in it. This is another rough edge that's been smoothed out. Next, let's talk about Torbjorn. His kit used to revolve more around his turret. He was like a Team Fortress 2 engineer. And his ultimate used to play with his turret. Nowadays his ultimate is just cheese on the ground, which I suppose is more useful in a variety of situations, but also just strips Torbjorn of a core part of his identity. I'd also like to talk about another game, Deadlock, which I've been playing way too much of recently, not gonna lie. Now, Deadlock is a MOBA and Overwatch is a hero shooter, so I am comparing apples to oranges a bit here, but bear with me. This is McGinnis, a character that's also built around turrets, and look what she can do. I can have so many turrets up, I can heal them, her whole kit is this cohesive thing built around her identity. Meanwhile, Torbjorn just lost his identity as a turret guy. Next we have Bastion, which I'm sure is a controversial character, but this iteration of him is so much more interesting. You have a character that's strong if he's completely stationary. This also means that he's way more of a niche character. Like, if you can't set yourself up, you're not gonna do well with him, and when you do well with him, you're gonna do really well. Compared to the current iteration where he's this versatile character that doesn't really differentiate himself enough from the rest, I feel like. Also, oh boy, I miss his old ultimate. It was one of the most fun ultimates in the game. Another change I feel is criminal is straight up removing Maze Freeze. Like, the ice character can't freeze people anymore. How much more can you strip a character of their identity? I know at some point we decided we don't like crowd control anymore, and on that note we also removed Cassidy's stun, and in hindsight I think crowd control is fine actually. Maze Freeze is not that broken. Cassidy's stun is completely fine. Like, if we complain about Cassidy's done being there, then it's gone. Now we're gonna complain about the things it used to counter being too oppressive, like Tracer and Genji. I feel like the developers should have stuck to their guns on some of the changes. Certain things were designed a certain way for a reason, and that reason has been lost to time in some of these cases. I'm gonna jump back into Deadlock for a second and show you Dynamo. His ultimate is very similar to Zarya's, and if you buy certain items, I can ult with a really big range. I can use Refresher, which refreshes my ult, and I can use it twice in a row. Like, that's pretty crazy. I can also have AoE abilities that get really insane ranges late in the game. Some of these things seem a little broken at face value, but they're actually fun, and when you design with them in mind, it works. We don't have to nerf everything into the ground. In fact, maybe Deadlock has the opposite problem. It has too many rough edges. Like, I don't know how to pick it up without getting a little hurt. Meanwhile, Overwatch sanded every little rough edge down, and it feels bland is what it is. To round up the rest of the characters I want to talk about, Roadhog is super fun to play in Classic. Like, I can do damage to people, I feel like I can take picks. I'm not just a generic tank guy. In fact, I'm super vulnerable. I can't even move while I heal myself. I don't get any resistance when I heal myself. Also, his right click, his alternate fire is super fun to play with. Why ever they decided that was a good idea to remove, who knows. Reinhardt. Reinhardt feels more like a tank than he is now. This version of the shield has so much health, it doesn't break as easily. And that's his core identity, right? The shield, let him have it. And this is only the classic characters. What happened to Sombra's invisibility is kind of crazy. It went from that being the core part of her kit and identity to, if I translocate, I'm gonna get the invisibility. So just as this, I'm gonna use it to escape for 5 seconds and that's it. I'm not even sure how to elaborate on what happened to Doomfist, but he's not the same character anymore in any way. As a conclusion, I want to say this isn't even about game balance, but rather a design philosophy. Overwatch Classic is not balanced, but it's not because certain abilities exist and we should straight up remove them from the game. We can find a middle ground where the things that make the game interesting stay in the game. Instead, if a character is too strong, we can emphasize its weakness. For example, if Widow is too oppressive, you wouldn't remove her ability to headshot, maybe you'd lower her health so she's easier to get jumped and die. Otherwise, we end up with what we have now, where characters feel kinda samey, not very unique. They're interchangeable in most situations, which at the end of the game makes the game less interesting, which makes the game less fun. Anyway, thanks for listening to me ramble about Overwatch. I really care about this game. I've been playing it since release, and it's really sad to see it gradually become a worse game. And not just because of its business practices, but because of the shift in design philosophy as well. Take care.